I have a great panel, and we're going to ask a few questions here, and I hope they're ready. If you all could just pass the mics down real quick to kind of introduce yourself and what role you play on campus here at Mississippi State.
So again, I'm Amelia Rogers. I'm the Associate Director for Student Activities, and in my role, I get to advise the Student Association and Dance Marathon, and then I get to work with all of you great organizations through OrgSync.
I'm Dale Robertson. I work with Event Services, Union Operations, and Audiovisual Services. So any reservation that your student orgs will make pretty much anywhere on campus will go through my office. Any audiovisual needs you need will go through our office, and setups like tables, chairs, staging, that kind of thing will also go through us. So we pretty much manage the student org form, making sure all that is taken care of and gets back to us with everybody's approval on it before final approval goes through to the Center Student Activities Office.
I'm Megan Franks. I am the Interim Director of Student Leadership Community Engagement at the Center for Community Engaged Learning, and including the Maroon Volunteer Center. So anything that you see on OrgSync that is service related or service hours or volunteering, it typically comes through our office.
Hi, my name is Emily Pomykowski. I am the Graduate Assistant for Facilities over at the Sanderson Center. I do a lot of reservations at the Sanderson Center, so if any of your student organizations need any reservations for big events or just a studio, those emails are going to be passed through me and my supervisor.
All right, great. So like I said, we have a great panel here, and we're going to go ahead and dive into these questions. So first question, how do you balance between autonomy and advising, and how involved are you with your organization? I'm going to point this question to Amelia, as she advises multiple organizations in the Center for Student Activities office.
So as I mentioned before, it really depends on the organization specifically. With the Student Association specifically, I have a little bit more of a hands-on direct role because of some of the larger events that they're doing, like Tabor talked about. So really helping them kind of think through and mitigate some of that risk in their events. And then also because they are such a large student organization, making sure that they're all staying on task in all aspects of the organization. With Dance Marathon, I take a little bit of a different role. So they're a very motivated, self-driven student organization who does small fundraising events throughout the year and then does their large celebration event typically in the spring. And so with them, I take a direct role in the financial aspect because they are an organization that raises a lot of money. Last year, they raised about $93,000. And so I take a very specific role in helping monitor and track that aspect of it. But as far as event planning, I stay out of their way. So with balancing kind of the autonomy and the advising, really, as I mentioned before, making sure, like, taking into consideration your student organization and your advisor or your leaders for that year. Some years I've had really great leaders who I get to take a little bit of a break and I just check in with them and hold them accountable. And some years I've had leaders that I've really had to step through everything step by step. And so it depends in that regard. I would always encourage you to push and challenge them. Because if you are holding their hand every step of the way, you're not giving them the opportunity to learn some of those skill sets themselves. And then I guess as involved, it really kind of depends. Time management, both of those aspects. I'm a sponsored student organization advisor, so it is part of my job responsibility to stay on task. With the Student Association, I have several groups within that organization that I'm doing weekly meetings. And then for certain events, there's a lot of direct involvement, for example, Willog Bash. Whereas with Dance Marathon, I really specifically have weekly meetings with their upper leadership team, and then I check in with their executive team, which is about 19 students, kind of on a monthly basis. So.
All right, thank you for that answer, Amelia. Amelia is kind of like a super advisor. She advises multiple groups and does a great job of balancing all of them. So she's definitely setting the high standard for that. Okay, Megan, is it possible to track service hours in the system, and what is my role as an advisor in that process?
It is now. The service hours aren't automatic, so if a student's out at a volunteer site and they're volunteering, Mississippi State doesn't automatically know that, and so trying to communicate that to 22,000 students, they have to log those volunteer hours. So if you go within your OrgSync portal, there's a section called involvement, and you can log event participation, service participation, and membership. And so we always communicate to students, log those service hours if you want to be eligible for volunteer awards or service awards. OrgSync has a great co-curricular record where a student can actually capture the events that they're participating in and then reflect on those experiences that they are participating in outside of the classroom. And so they have to log those hours. Now, you as an advisor can go in and look at what they're logging. You can also, I believe, approve what they're logging. But I'll communicate to you that you don't want to be the person that's responsible for all of those service hours. So you don't want to be the only one in there approving and logging hours for your students. And so if you're doing that, you want to get out of that role. The community partner is typically the one that approves those hours. So the students are trained to log their hours and then have a reference, and that reference is typically the agency that they're working with or the student volunteer leader that's over that site.
All right. Thank you for that, Megan. Dale, this next question is for you. What is the biggest mistake that organizations typically make in planning events?
That's got a lot of answers, actually. To start with, one of the first things that occurs is when they're planning an event and they start filling out the student org form, they actually have to go in and put you down as their advisor and your email address. What they tend to do is put their own email address, and then you never see it. So that's one of the first things that happens. Probably some things that they would want to do in planning an event also is looking at the calendar and seeing what else is going on if this is a major event. One of the things we've got going on right now is Friday night we have a Miss MSU pageant going on, and we have, I believe, Sauce in the Streets at the same time, which usually wouldn't happen, and it's right outside that building. So that's going to be a little bit of an interesting issue. So looking to see what else is going on, see if they might want to join with another student organization for a large event if it's on the same date, or possibly move their date. Another thing that occurs is that the student org form is not a reservation. That's actually just a requirement of the student's office. So what ends up happening, a lot of times they'll put in a request, and because the form asks them, where do you want to have your event? And they're going to put in the space that they want and the time they want it, and they're going to submit that through, and people are going to approve that. And so a lot of times they'll get that information back and they think they're finished there. But they actually have to make the reservation through, if it's on campus, through the event services office. And another thing that has to happen is any detail they put on the student org form has to match 100% with what they make the reservation. So for instance, if they're using McCool Hall, room 130 at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and that's the reservation they make with our office. If that's not exactly what they put on their student org form, it won't be approved. So that's some of the things that they need to watch for.
All right, kind of keeping it going with making reservations and everything. Emily, is there any specific process for reserving spaces in the Sanderson or intramural fields?
So there is. Right now our reservations mainly go just via email, but I am in the process of making an online, it's a Google form that any student organization or department would be able to just go on to our website, click the Google form, and then what I'm thinking is that it would be we'd reach out to you once we look over the form and everything. But as of right now, I haven't launched that yet, but as of right now, it's just simply emailing my supervisor, Will Jordan, directly about reserving spaces in the Sanderson and giving us as much detail up front. And one thing I would like to point out is that make sure that they are putting what organization they are from. That reduces a lot of emails. But other than that, it's just mainly via email. But look forward to us having a reservation form on our website soon.
All right, kind of continuing on the event trend. When you all arrive, you all should have received a matrix in regards to amount of people and maybe police that may need to attend those events. Tabor, this question is for you. what is the process for hiring police or security for events, and what are some common problems you may have during events?
So, going back to my ramble earlier, the size and scale of your event is going to dictate whether the university decides that you should have university security. And we're always going to err on the side that we're going to have the most safe possible event that we can. And so we have come up with, and I agree, it's not perfect, but that's what we've come up with. And the matrix that you have in front of you will detail a best faith estimate of when we're going to have security. Those are going to be large events, typically open to the public in our larger event spaces, or that have some reason, we have some reason to believe pose a security threat, whether it be a particular speaker potentially, or a controversial issue. So it's like everything with risk. I can't give you a cookie cutter answer to that this is going to be. Typically size and the amount of non-university community members is going to dictate your the university's request, or excuse me, the university is going to say that you're going to have security.
All right. I'm going to ask about 2 more questions, and then I'm going to open up to you all to ask our panel some questions, all right? So I know community service is a big aspect for our student body here. So Megan, one more question for you. How do I find service opportunities that already exist or for my groups to be involved in?
So anything that's posted to the calendar on OrgSync that has a handprint beside it is a service event. And so you can search for them kind of 2 main ways. You can click on the calendar of events and view projects that have a handprint. Those are service. Or you can click on service opportunities and kind of view that long, exhausting list of events that are going on campus, off campus, and the surrounding community. What the students work really hard to do in the center is to tag all of those projects when they come in. So we try to think about potential students, the majors that they're in, or our groups that might be interested in those specific volunteer projects. So they can contact those agencies and work directly with them. So some of our students that are more engaged in volunteer work will actually work directly with that agency, call them, and working out that weekly or monthly opportunity that their members are participating in. I encourage you to, as you're coaching and mentoring your students, have them think long term. So not just going out, going to Habitat for Humanity once a semester, and we're all very happy with that. That's wonderful, but what other kind of opportunities or projects could you do for that agency, thinking about the mission of the student or the group that you're advising and those skills that those students have. Also, just be mindful of our agencies. So some of them can't accommodate student groups as large as 150 at a time. Habitat for Humanity is a construction site. They can only accommodate 20 student volunteers. So having to explain, to a group of 150 students why they can't all go there at one time. And so as you're kind of working with them to find service events, just looking at those agencies, working with that agency to find out what's the optimal number of student volunteers. And then if that group has too many at one time, working with them to have a number of opportunities where they can volunteer and work with that agency.
All right, real quick, Dale, how can I be made aware of outstanding bills for the organization I advise?
Okay, if you have, if your student organization has reserved something through the Event Services Office that's going to incur cost, you can contact the Event Services Office and ask for me, or Vanessa Collier can also check to see if there's anything outstanding. Now, one thing that will happen, if you have an organization with an outstanding bill that goes, I think it's going to be 60 days, we will, the financial office will contact me, and then I'll contact the Center for Student Activities to put a hold on that student group's account to make sure that they are aware of the bill, and that maybe another event isn't planned until that's taken care of. But we can also, I believe I've also instructed the financial office when they send the email that they're past due to the organization, they're also contacting the advisor. So you should get it automatically, but if you ever need it or want to check it, you're very welcome to call me at the Event Services office.
All right. Any questions that we may have from the audience here today? All right, Shardana. Shardana's question was, is there any funding provided by the Center for Student Activities for programming? And if so, how does she get that?
So as promised, I said I would talk about appropriations. So appropriations is funding set aside through the Student Association to help student organizations in their planning. There's also a specific set of funding within that for new organizations to start set up anything that they need to get running as an organization. To apply for that, you do it through OrgSync, through your individual organization's portal. You'll go on under Treasury. It's one of the tabs at the top. And then you will create a new budget. It's going to take you through all of the questions that they specifically have. One of the key things to note with that is they're going to ask how you want to receive your funding. So for sponsored student organizations, it is typically the easiest and the fastest to do that through a banner transfer. So if you'll provide to us your banner account number, we can do that, and then we'll send you all of the documentation that goes along with that. For registered student organizations, as of about a year ago, we moved out of the process of writing individual students checks. So you have to, as a student organization, have a tax ID number. We have information on OrgSync, and we're happy to send that out to you also as advisors, how to apply for that through the IRS. And then typically what you'll do with that is you'll set up a bank account for your student organization off campus. The reason that we moved to that was it is tied to our scholarship process. If students are receiving money from the university, it is noted as a scholarship. And so it's affecting students' ability to apply for scholarships if their organization is receiving funding. It also makes that student, or you as an advisor, whoever was receiving the check previously, responsible for paying taxes for that money. This process helps alleviate all of that, but it does come with it. You have to apply for taxes or pay taxes as a student organization. Now, typically, the process is very seamless unless you're raising more than $50,000 a year, which is not the majority of our student organizations. And so when you apply for that EIN number, they'll send you your time frame of when you have to apply for taxes. Typically, it is May, which is different than an individual's tax process in April. And so keep that in mind, because it's typically after graduation, after your students have left and transitioned, and you still are responsible for doing that. Again, if you're not raising or utilizing, working with more than $50,000, it's an electronic postcard that you'll simply go and state, we're not dealing with more than $50,000, submit. So it's a very easy process, but you do have to track that. If you do not file taxes for 3 consecutive years, the IRS will delete your tax ID number. So then you've got implications if you have a bank account or something out there associated with that.
All right. Any more questions we have from our wonderful advisors here? Okay. So the question was, what is the advisor's financial role, and how deep in what are the expectations for the advisor when it comes to finances for the organization?
So again, it varies if you're a sponsored or a registered group. Sponsored, you're still going to fall within the university's regulations as far as looking into your banner accounts, tracking all of that information, submitting that appropriately. If you have a pro card, there's additional processes with that. For registered student organizations, again, we've asked that you sign off and be aware of all financial transactions. Typically, it's pretty easy. Don't spend more than you have, and don't steal. And students will laugh at me because particularly they ask during fundraisers, what are the rules and regulations of fundraising? And I always tell them, don't steal and make sure it's a legitimate organization that you're giving funding to. And they laugh, and I say, I'm saying it because it's been an issue. Don't steal, it will come back, we will find out, and make sure it's a legitimate organization. So you as an advisor, be aware of what they're spending, help consult on some of those things, help them think through some of those processes, because again, they don't think about the aspects of you have to provide power for certain events, you have to pay for security for police, you have to provide food, all of those different aspects. And so really making sure that they're thinking through that process and that they're fiscally making decisions so that that organization can survive and thrive.
And once about every 2 to 3 years, we do have a student who steals from a student organization who is ultimately, typically organizations are much more benevolent and allow them to pay the money back. In some cases, they go to jail, and in all cases, they're separated from the institution.
All right, got a question in the back. Question was, is there an advisor handbook?
So most of this information and resources are in the student organization manual. There's a specific section for advisors, and you can find that student organization manual on OrgSync. You can also find it on the Center for Student Activities website, which is hosted under the Union website, so union.mstate.edu.
And I want to say that's a great resource that I think that we don't use it enough. It has things in there like how to properly market your event. So we actually refer to that manual in our office a lot, how to budget. So there's different sections that could be very helpful to your students, and then also it'd be very helpful to you in your role as an advisor. And electronic copy is available on OrgSync.
All right, we're gonna take one more question. You got a question? Shardonna, you're down the hall from us, so if you got a question. Oh. Thank you, Shardonna. There's a Greek resource manual for those working with Greek students on campus. You got a question?
Is there a bank in the community that you would recommend to start that student organization account?
That is a great question. We do not have a specific bank that we recommend, but I would encourage you to look at their different requirements. Some of the banks require you to make a deposit when you're opening that account, and so that's great information to know before you show up there. Most of them will also require that you bring a copy of your constitution or a letter from our office stating that you are an official organization. We're happy to help you with any of that process, but there's not a specific bank. We have not had any issues, so I would not tell you not to go to a certain one, but that kind of depends on what your organization's needs are too.
All right, great. I hope we covered a lot of information. I know at the beginning you all kind of gave us some things you wanted to learn, so I hope we covered most of that. Please take the matrix and the event management checklist with you all and kind of use that as a reference as you're working and you're meeting with your organizations. Just kind of go through that and, ask them those questions, ask yourself those questions, as Tabor mentioned, just to kind of prepare for whatever events your group may have. We appreciate you all for being here. Most of you all probably have done this already, but make sure your organizations have updated their portal, OrgSync portal. By that I mean make sure you have an updated roster, updated constitution, updated advisor information, and updated officers and everything in OrgSync, and then we can go through and approve it and make sure that those people are accepting those roles and those positions as well as you all as well. If you have any additional questions, we can definitely here to ask, and then we're on the third floor of student activities, and everyone is in their respective offices as well. Thank you all again. Hope you enjoyed the lunch, and we enjoyed having you. All right? Thank you.